Change your perception of what you're looking at, and everything changes. Hey, my name is Giorgio, and this is the How to Do Life podcast. If you've ever felt that no matter what you try, something is missing, then you're in the right place. My aim with this podcast is to begin filling in those blanks for you. So open your mind and get ready, because I'm about to show you an entirely different way to look at your life. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. So let's get started. All right, welcome to another episode. Let's talk about the difference between loneliness and being alone. This is something I think a lot of people struggle with. Whenever I'm having a session with somebody and they end up sharing with me that they're scared of being alone, I question them on that because I think a lot of people have confusion around what it means to be lonely and what it means to be alone. In my opinion, at least in my personal life, I don't mind being alone. Alone, I would consider to be healthy for a lot of people. But loneliness has an emotional charge with it. It's almost like isolation, but the kind of isolation that's painful. Whereas when you're choosing to be alone, or when you are alone, it's not necessarily painful. It's just objectively being alone. And so I think it's important for us to firstly develop an ability to be alone comfortably and willingly, and then also be able to address emotions of loneliness and where that's coming from. What's really interesting to me that I've seen in my own life, especially throughout my younger years, I don't see it so much now, but it was certainly present in the earlier years of my life, was a state of loneliness that I experienced. And loneliness, I'll also add, is something that we tend to experience even when we're amongst people. You could be standing in a crowd, you could be at a venue, you could be at an event, a social event, and feel lonely. And for me, that was something that I struggled with as a child and as a teen as well, was this perpetual feeling of feeling lonely, and I couldn't work out why. I was connected and communicating with different people throughout my life, but I still felt this undertone of loneliness. And I worked out why. As an adult, I was able to put the pieces of the puzzle together and understand where that emotion was coming from. But at the time, it was something I was struggling with. And I think a lot of people struggle with this for a long time. So if there's something that I can give to you in this episode that's going to help you start to shift your experience of loneliness, then I'm doing my job, I think. Now, for me, the loneliness I was experiencing was because I realized and I felt like I saw the world very differently to the people around me, including my own family. There were times where we'd be sitting at the dinner table and I would see things differently. And sometimes I would express the way I saw something, or, I was kind of taking my family on a journey with where my thoughts were going. And my mum, lovingly, there wasn't any judgment in the comment, but I realized how different my way of thinking was. Whenever mum would point it out to me, she'd say to me, like, where do you go in there? Referring to my mind. She's like, where exactly do you go? Almost like I go somewhere that is different from here, out there somewhere. Now, I don't know that that's necessarily the case, but it was almost like, she's like, where you go in your mind is different to where everybody else goes. And it was almost like this curiosity of like, who are you? And it was endearing, and it was a bit of the running joke in the family, but at the same time, it kind of begged the question of me of like, yeah, why is it that I think so differently to people? And so with that came this sense of loneliness, that my thought process was something that not many people certainly not anyone that I knew at the time throughout my childhood and my teenage years, people didn't think the way I thought. It was kind of jolting in a way, but also isolating, because I realized only I think this way. And being a child or a teenager, adults aren't necessarily going to take me seriously. They're not necessarily going to give weight to what I have to say because I don't have a whole lot of life experience behind me. And so there was this sort of isolation. No one was really kind of nurturing that out of me at the time. I just had to work it out on my own. And then there was a period throughout my teenage years where I genuinely felt alone in what I was experiencing. I had to deal with being bullied and beaten up. My parents were running their own business, which was very consuming of their time and their focus and their energy, which left very little room for me. And being the youngest at the time, my two older sisters, they were able to look after themselves. They were of an age where there was a lot more self-reliance and discipline, and, they had their own rhythm for their own days and their lives. Whereas for me, I was still sort of transitioning into becoming a young man, I suppose. And I was fumbling my way through that, admittedly. And that's usually points where people are influenced by their parents. The parents kind of shepherd them through that experience until they're able to kind of do their own thing independently. And I didn't quite get that because I was so focused on the business. And it's not something I harbor any judgment to them on. It's something that I've reconciled and resolved, and I've actually come to appreciate. But at the time, it was a struggle for me. So that kind of fueled the sense of loneliness during that period for me. And so what I found was, while there were all these people around me and I wasn't alone, I felt lonely. And interestingly, there were times where I was alone at those ages, but I felt content. I was actually comfortable in my own space, in my own skin, in my own presence. And I came to appreciate that in a different way that I think a lot of people struggle with. But then what happened was, as I started to develop into an adult, the loneliness would kick back in again because I struggled to relate to people around me. Not that I was ostracized. Again, I was around a lot of people and I was socializing a lot, but there was a struggle to connect on a meaningful level. And then I was able to reconcile these differences. And I found that by opening up to people whenever I felt comfortable enough to, they felt a similar way, but for different reasons. They felt moments of loneliness. They felt like they struggled to connect with people. And this is where things started to get really interesting for me, especially as a coach and somebody who studies the mind and the way people operate and the thoughts that they're wrestling with, is that most of the things that people do in their day-to-day life, they are doing as a way to compensate for a sense of loneliness. I want you to hear that again. What most people do in their day-to-day life are attempts to compensate for the sense of loneliness that they're feeling. When I put that piece of the puzzle together, I realized that one of the undercurrents of most people's behavior that they wish they could change was just them trying to solve loneliness. And you'll find that this is true for yourself. Consumerism. You're probably doing that in moments of loneliness. When you're feeling connected to people, you're not sitting there on your phone shopping online, right? When you're feeling connected to the people around you, you're not sitting there on your phone doom scrolling through social media or commenting on people's posts, right? You're with those people because you are experiencing a sense of connection. The same is true with when people drink as a way to make themselves feel less lonely. You'll see this in social settings. One of the biggest reasons I see people drink, at least the ones that have admitted it to me, is that people drink socially as a way to ease the discomfort of being in that social setting. Now, the reason why people feel uncomfortable in these social settings is because they feel lonely in these social settings. And so drinking gives them a sense of connection with the people that they're with because they feel like they don't know how to connect with these people any other way. The same is true with all kinds of behavior. Netflixing and chilling. Did I say that right? Probably not, but who cares, right? When you Netflix and chill, you have a desire to connect. You're connecting with the actors. You're connecting with the story, the characters. Or maybe you're connecting with other people that you know also watch the show and you're sort of like talking about it and gossiping and, well, not really gossiping, but sort of like having this banter and this conversation around the show. Or if it's a reality show, you might be doing that, right? This is why reality shows are so popular, is because it gives people a sense of connection with the people that they're watching, even if it's not exactly reality. And so what I think most people don't realize is how much of their behavior, how much of their decisions are being influenced by a desire to compensate and solve loneliness in their lives. Now, here's where things get perhaps even more painful, but also profound. The reason why you feel lonely in these moments is not because of the absence of connection with others, but because of the absence of connection with yourself. Think about that. You don't like being in your own company in those moments. If you had no TV, no phone, let's just say we just take electricity out of the picture of your life in that moment, and no books, no physical books to read, you would have to be with yourself and your thoughts and not try and escape from that. That means having to get comfortable with who you are. And if you're uncomfortable in your own presence and in your own company, then you're going to do all these different things to try and avoid that. But what if you getting comfortable with being with yourself, you coming to appreciate and love yourself, will actually help you solve the sense of loneliness? Because when you're then alone, you won't feel lonely because you like being in your company. You're content with who you are. You appreciate and love and respect all these different parts of who you are. And if there are parts of you that are coming up that you feel uncomfortable with, then you can explore that and look for what is here for me to learn about myself. So it's a matter of giving yourself the opportunity to learn to love yourself and to love being in your company. Otherwise, you're spending your time, a lot of your time, believe it or not, escaping being with yourself. I'm not about that. I don't want that for you. I want you to feel comfortable being in your own skin and being in your own company. You wake up with yourself. You go to bed with yourself. You go to the toilet with yourself. You have a shower with yourself, hopefully, right? All these different moments throughout your day are with you and you alone. So why not get comfortable with who you are? Why not explore the different facets of what makes you you? Why not spend the time investing yourself in resolving the baggage that you have and the judgments you have about yourself and come to learn and to love and appreciate yourself deeply? Because then loneliness won't ever be an issue for you. You can be in a group of people. Maybe you might feel like you can't quite connect with these people because they're not your tribe. You don't relate to them. Maybe you don't drink and they're all drinkers and they're drinking in that setting and you're like, it's not really a vibe that I'm catching right now. It won't matter because you are content within yourself and comfortable with yourself in those moments. That, to me, is a true sense of freedom and empowerment. And it solves loneliness and it makes aloneness something that you actually appreciate. Because being alone isn't bad. It's not a bad thing. Sometimes that's where we have the greatest breakthroughs and the biggest ahas. Geniuses throughout time have dedicated time to intentionally being alone with themselves, with their thoughts, with their inspirations, with the problems that they're wrestling with, just to be able to focus on these areas and allow insights to arrive and different breakthroughs to arrive. Einstein was notorious for it. He would go for walks by himself just so he could step away from the work that he was doing and sort of let his mind mull over and kind of digest what he's been working on, but in a different environment without it being actively pursued, which means that he would have had to be comfortable being in his own company and in his own presence. As a result of him doing that, he's been able to unlock principles of the universe that have influenced everything that we do. You wouldn't be able to listen to what I'm doing right now or watch me if it wasn't for the work that he's unlocked that's enabled all the technologies that we've been able to use today. So just small moments where we are comfortable with ourselves, appreciating ourselves, and not feeling a sense of loneliness or aloneness might actually be the thing that solves a lot of the challenges you're facing and helps you change the behavior that you keep relying on to unconsciously fill the void of loneliness that it's never going to fill. Nothing can fill loneliness the way you can for yourself. A true, complete self with a big heart and a big mind and a deep sense of connection with who you truly are, that is what, quote unquote, fills the void of loneliness. So my hope is that during this episode, I've inspired you to reframe loneliness, to look at your behavior, to see the things that you've been doing as a way to solve this loneliness and realize that you're not really alone because you're with you the whole time. And it's time for you to start appreciating and loving who you really are. And if you want a glimpse into what that looks like, go back to my very first episode of this podcast where I talk about self-love. It's an important lesson and an important episode. And anyone that's gone back and listened to it, or anyone that listened to it when I first released it, sent me all kinds of feedback of being surprised by how simple and profound it was as a concept. So make sure you go and check that out if you haven't, or if you have, go back for the refresh. Anyway, I wanted to give you this framework. I wanted to maybe redefine aloneness and loneliness in your life, give you a different perspective on it, and maybe even dissipate some of the fear you have around what it means to be lonely, because you're not lonely. You're with you. And quite honestly, you're the best company in the world. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. Thank you for being here. Make sure you have subscribed or follow the podcast, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.